Hello everyone, I'm Fozzie or Cam, and I'm here as always with my co-host Will. How you doing today, Will?
Doing great, Cam. I've got my Everything Podcast mug. I
I
would
did
like to
too.
thank your family for giving this to me for Christmas this year. A big thank you to them. I absolutely love this. It's fantastic, and I think it's a great addition to our show. So I'm doing great. And on another note, this is arguably the most excited I've ever been for an episode of the Everything Podcast. I am out of my mind excited right now. So I'm doing great, Cam. And how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I also have my podcast mug, and my camera is making it upside down, but that's fine. But yes, as Will said, I am also very excited for this episode because this is our New Year's episode. And if you're familiar with the podcast, then you'll know that our New Year's episodes are always end up being our best episodes. We never really planned that to happen when that first happened, but it did, and we've decided to make it a tradition. So today we have Mike on with us, and we will be doing tier lists of a bunch of different categories, such as, let me pull it up now. A lot of these things are things we've talked about on the podcast before, and things that we think that you guys are the viewers will all enjoy. So the things we'll be covering today are Bruce Springsteen's albums. We're all big fans of Bruce here on at the Everything Podcast, as you guys probably know. And then we'll transition to Marvel movies and shows, then Rocky and the Creed movies, then Wes Anderson movies, then Bill Murray movies, then the Robert De Niro movies, Leonardo DiCaprio movies, and we'll finish it off with Star Wars movies and TV shows. Um, so yeah, right off the bat, I kind of want to get things started here with our Bruce Springsteen ranking.
Cam, before we go into that, I just like to say that I have my Everything Podcast mug here too.
I don't
My,
know if not. I'm not sure if you
I just
received
had, yeah,
one.
I got it right here. It's right here. The Everything Podcast mug
Oh,
is right in my
we
hand.
can't really see it. You might need to pick it up
Well, yeah,
for the
I
camera.
have kind of a shoulder thing going on
Oh,
right
okay.
now from just some Taekwondo, so there's only so much movement I can put in my shoulder. But yeah, I have my Everything Podcast mug here too, because all of us who've been involved in the Everything Podcast have our official mugs. I want to say too, just what an honor it is to be here for the Everything Podcast as we go rolling in from closing out 2023, going into 2024 strong. I think we as a threesome have built a great momentum over the years here on the
Hmm.
podcast. I'm just excited for our collaboration and what we have moving forward into the future. I think you know future's bright, and our creative minds all coming together in this endeavor really has just been so rewarding and promising, and I'm just so thankful for the collaboration.
I mean, there was just so many things wrong with what you just said, but I'm willing to look past that for the sake of the podcast.
I know. Hey, Cam, I don't want to be, thank you. I am not going to take all the credit for the success of the show. I know that's what you were hinting at, but this has been a team effort. And I want to bow to you as Fozzie as getting the ball rolling here. And we all contributed in our own unique.
I mean,
Looks like Will's having maybe some technical difficulties on his end.
that
Seems
is
to just not be on the screen there for a second, but
what's looking like. I don't know what's going on there, but we'll figure it out. Will is back. There we
Oh,
go.
Mike, you are unbelievable. You are
thank you.
unbelievable.
Thank you,
I
Will.
don't even.
You guys, just a praise. Please
Okay.
stop. It's not about me. It's about us.
All
It's
right.
about everyone on the Everything Podcast with our mugs, just being together, being part
I
of it.
think it's time to start off. Cam, are you ready to do the Bruce Springsteen album
Yes, I
tier list?
am ready.
I think I'm ready for that.
I am completely ready. So let's get started here. Um, I believe everyone should have eyes on what's going on right here. So it looks like first.
Can I ask a clarifying point, Cam, just for the albums down below? I haven't scanned them. in their entirety yet, but we know we have every album there.
Um, everything except for Only the Strong Survive. I
Do I see
couldn't.
East? Do I
I
see East Street Shuffle? Wild the Instant to East Street. Oh, there it is.
Yep,
Okay, I know I
right
see it.
there.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we're not going to do the Seeger. Oh, we do have the Seeger
Yep.
sessions, but only the Strong Will Survive has not been included. Okay, thank you.
All right. So, first one on the list is Nebraska. When I go on YouTube and I look at other people's rankings for Bruce Springsteen albums, Nebraska is usually in the top three, if not number one, in a lot of the rankings that I've seen. And I enjoy the album. It's definitely a darker listen and a more acoustic listen than a lot of his other projects, because it's mostly just him strumming on the guitar with some harmonica mixed in there. I really enjoy it. I think there are really some compelling stories in there. Um, but Will and Mike, what are each of your takes on this album?
Do you want to start, Mike?
Sure. Well, it just so happens, we just came up on, I believe, the 30th anniversary of the release of Nebraska. And sometime last year, there was a book came out, I believe by Warren Zanes is the author, formerly of the band the Del Fuegos. I saw the Del Fuegos in their very last performance at Reagan's Place in Situate, Massachusetts, many years ago. His brother Dan Zanes has gone on to be a renowned children's musician. So, but I got the book Deliver Me from Nowhere about the making of Nebraska. It's riveting. So, like right now, it's like catapulting into my number one slot. Not that it's sitting there, but I definitely have it as top tier. It's, not the everyday listen, but it's a compelling piece of artistry that's unmatched and unrivaled. And in many ways, when it came out, it shocked the record industry.
All right, Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I haven't really listened to this album on its own. However, throughout different live concerts that Bruce Springsteen has put out over the years, I've gotten the chance to see him perform many of these songs with the E Street Band, songs like Atlantic City, Mansion on the Hill, Johnny 99, Open All Night, My Father's House. So I'm going to go ahead and put this album in the top tier, because even though I haven't, really listened to it on its own, the chances I've had to see him perform so many of these songs with the Street Band, and in the case of Open All Night, a stunning version, in my opinion, with the Seeger Sessions Band, the chances I've seen for these songs to be played, or the times I've seen Bruce Springsteen perform these songs live with either the Street Band or the Seeger Sessions Band, I am blown away by each and every one of them. So I've got this in the top tier.
All right, so I think it's all kind of agreed upon that Nebraska goes into S tier.
So S is superior.
S is superior, I guess. I'm not
Okay.
sure what the the what each letter why S is the best, and not A. Um, but I'm sure tiermaker.com have their reasons. Next here, we have Darkness on the Edge of Town, which is a favorite of mine. I just go back to it a lot, and right now, I think it is my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. Every song, every song hits. There's not one song like, I'll skip that. Every song is a really good song. I mean, he has a lot of songs in this album that he plays live and that have become iconic. I mean, there are some songs that are slow, some songs that are more rockin'. It's pretty much everything that you could ask for in a Bruce Springsteen album. Um, so yeah, it's definitely recently become one of, if not my favorite Bruce Springsteen albums. But Will and Mike, what's your take on Darkness on the Edge of Town?
I'll let you go next, Will.
Yeah, so for me, this is also definitely a top tier Springsteen album. I remember when he put out the box set that had the Promise with the Darkness on the Edge of Town outtakes, along with the full performance with the Street Band of the Darkness on the Edge of Town album. I remember seeing something that said that was Clarence Clemens' last full big performance with the E Street Band, so a monumental moment from that standpoint. That particular performance of the album from start to finish with the E Street Band. So I love this album. Badlands has become a classic song of Bruce's to play live. Darkness on the Edge of Town is great live. Prove It All Night is great live. There are just so many great songs on this album. It's one of his most iconic. I feel like I feel like back in like the 80s and 90s, I feel like that was the heyday of Bruce Springsteen. That's when he was the most popular, and this is one of those, I think, monumental albums for him from that time period. So definitely top tier for me. And how about for you, Mike?
No doubt. This is top tier, similar to Cam, and actually has climbed over the years, in my opinion of it. And a lot of that, it does get redefined through its live performances. I think so much of it is definitive Bruce Springsteen. And what I'd like to point to is, you have a couple songs, you have the epics, the ones people turn to a lot. But what about the songs like Something in the Night and Streets of Fire? You pick one of those songs up, put them on another artist's album. That's the best song they've ever written. So I'm slotting this in absolutely superior. And there are times where I have, within the last several years, named this as my favorite Bruce Springsteen album.
Yeah, so I think we have 2 S tiers in a row. Is that agreed upon by everyone?
For sure.
All right. Darkness on the Edge of Town gets S tier. Next album is kind of mixed when it comes to Springsteen fans. A lot of them have mixed feelings about the album High Hopes. Me personally, I don't think I've listened to every single song on the album. But the songs I have heard, I haven't completely hated, especially the song High Hopes. I think that's actually a really good Springsteen song. But I cannot say the same for all the other songs I've heard off this record. It's definitely not a horrible album. I don't think Bruce has ever made a horrible album. But this is definitely not a go-to album of mine for in Bruce's catalog. So, I mean, if I had to rate it, I'd probably put it in D tier. Not saying I think it's a bad album, because like I said, I don't think Bruce has any bad albums, but it's definitely not prime Springsteen. But what are you guys' thoughts on High Hopes?
So what I think happened with this album is I think some of the songs on it had already been performed live from Bruce over the years, so I think that made it where they didn't feel fresh to people anymore. Like American Skin, 41 Shots, for instance, The Ghost of Tom Joad, even I think Dream Baby Dream he had performed before this album came out. However, here's my thought process, guys. Taking aside that, some of the songs on here were already known, I just want to go down the list. So there are 12 songs in total on this album. High Hopes, I enjoy. American Skin, 41 Shots, I love. Just Like Firewood, I love. Frankie Fell in Love, I love. The Ghost of Tom Joad, I love. The Wall, I love. And Dream Baby Dream, I love. So even though there's 5 songs on there that I'm not as wild about, 7 of those 12 songs I really enjoy if you just look at them on their own and take aside the fact that some of them were, already played live by Springsteen. So the fact that, 7 out of 12, that does mean that there's 5 songs that I don't enjoy as much. So that's going to take it down a bit for me. But because of the 7 songs out of the 12 that I do really enjoy, I'm going to say I would put it in the B tier.
Okay. Mike?
I did a similar thing as we were talking about it. I just brought up the track listing. And I agree with so many of the points that Will made, because familiarity of some of the songs decreased like their impact of, the first time you hear something on an album. That being said, those songs he made were remarkable. I also want to add Hunter of Invisible Game is another exceptionally
True. Yes.
strong song. And where did you have it again, Cam?
I had it in D tier.
So it all depends on how we want to approach this ranking, because I got to be honest, nothing I have from Bruce is going to be in that F. For me personally, would ever be F, E, or D. It just wouldn't get that low. And at first I thought maybe I'll just have everything chunked within 3 tiers. But if I want to go like kind of, Will sometimes has a ranking system where he goes like great, good, very good, solid. I can do a C category for this.
Okay. All right. So that seems to kind of balance it out. Will says B. I say D. Mike says C. So C
Yeah.
is right in the middle. I think C seems like the appropriate place for High Hopes.
Perfect.
Perfect. Next on our tier list is Tunnel of Love. This was an album I didn't listen to until a few months ago, actually. And I kind of avoided listening to it because I was like, there's no way I'm going to like it. I liked it. I did enjoy it. It's when people think of Bruce Springsteen, I feel like they don't think of Tunnel of Love. They think of Born in the USA. They think of the River, albums that aren't Tunnel of Love. And I can see why this doesn't fit the typical uh, Bruce Springsteen idea. Um, but that being said, I really enjoyed this album. I mean, Brilliant Disguise is one of my favorite Springsteen songs. And I mean, I really enjoyed this album. It was a cool kind of change of style for Bruce because this album followed right after Born in the USA, which, as we know, was this iconic Springsteen record. And then he follows it with Tunnel of Love, which is a very interesting move. Is that's correct, right? It follows Born in the USA, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I really did enjoy Tunnel of Love. I would probably myself put it in A tier. But I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this one because I feel like this one might have mixed reviews.
Do you want to go,
Well,
Mike?
no, I'll let you handle this one, Will.
Okay. So I would so first of all, what I want to start off by saying about this album is I think this is it, and this is a thought that just came to mind for me as I heard you talking about the album, Cam, and I was just sitting back and reflecting on it. What I find interesting about this album is I don't think you could I don't think you could categorize it as a Bruce Springsteen and the Street Band album or a Bruce Springsteen solo album. It's kind of right there in the middle because Bruce, has E Street Band members featured on certain songs, but he doesn't do the entire album with the E Street Band. But then on another note, he doesn't do the entire album solo. So it's an interesting album in that it's not an E Street Band album or a solo Bruce album. It's kind of right in the middle. So that's a thought that just came to me as I was thinking about it. But, I want to applaud Bruce for kind of, taking the bold route post Born in the USA. You could say the same thing about, what he did after the River, which was another huge album of his. He put out Nebraska, which wouldn't be the type of album that would be popular like The River did, but he was willing to be bold and put that out. I love that he did that. He did the same thing here with Tunnel of Love. I love when artists, don't always cater to what the fans want to do, but do what they want to do. So I love that Bruce was willing to be bold and follow up for it in the USA with an album that was not fully with the Street Band. So I say all of that to say I love this album and I have it in the top tier. How about for you, Mike?
February 1987. The Worcester Centrum. Opening leg of the TOL Tunnel of Love tour. 7th row, center stage. My first Bruce Springsteen concert. This album ranked tops in my favorite album for many years. So I do believe it's an adult album, and I believe as you grow in your life and in your relationships, you find more meaning and things reveal themselves in different ways. So I'm actually kind of intrigued and impressed that you both like it as much as you do. Absolutely elite Springsteen, elite on so many levels. We could do a whole episode on just this album.
All right, so it looks like we're feeling A to S tier. What would you guys think? I could do either.
I'll have to leave the show if it's not in the S tier.
All right. I mean, we don't really want that to happen, so looks like Tunnel of Love is going into S
Well, hold on.
tier.
This is a
Oh,
democracy, so I want to make sure. What are you both saying about it? Are you saying A
I
I
said S.
I could do S. Yeah, totally.
and you said S, Will?
I did.
Okay, yeah, S superior. Good.
Perfect.
But I want to be Democrat. I really wouldn't have left if you both had said A. I would have just let the math do the talking.
All right. Next up here, we have Human Touch, an album I think I've listened to once in my entire life, and I mean, I liked it. It definitely, at least me listening to it once definitely says something about it. And the first time I listened to it was to prepare for this ranking, and I thought it was a fine album. Kind of was what I expected. I'm not a huge fan of the Lucky Town, Human Touch, Bruce Springsteen albums. They're just not what I look for when I listen to Bruce. Um, it isn't a bad album by any means. I don't think it's a terrible album. I feel like it's kind of mixed for me. It kind of bored me a little bit. I felt like if I want to listen to Springsteen, I would pick so many other albums before I go to Human Touch. So for me, I'd probably have to throw this in C tier. Just an average listen. Didn't do a whole lot for me. Didn't crazily enjoy this record. So yeah, I feel like C would probably be the place for me. But I want to hear your thoughts on this, Mike and Will.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a bit of a controversial take here. So when I look, first of all, I love that he did the No Name Band project. I love the MTV Plugged show, one of my favorite Bruce shows. When I look at Lucky Town and Human Touch, Lucky Town is definitely my favorite of those two. That to me is one of Bruce's best albums. Human Touch, I don't have in the Lucky Town elite tier. However, I think it's probably his most underrated album. I really enjoy it, even though I don't have it in the Lucky Town tier. I love performances of songs like Roll Up the Dice for the album on MTV Plugged. So even though I don't have it in the Lucky Town tier, and Lucky Town is my favorite between these two albums with the No Name Band, I still really like this album, and I'm going to give the controversial take of putting it in the A tier.
Wow. Mike, how are we feeling about Human Touch?
Um, I'm always intrigued by both of your opinions on certain Springsteen albums because you have fresher ears that aren't necessarily attached to history, right? And where things are placed in the history. This is an album that's a curiosity in that song. You pull out an individual song, I'm actually intrigued by a lot of the songs in it. I don't think it always works as a whole. I think some of the production may have prevented that, and Springsteen has touched on that himself. I saw him reinvent some of these songs on the Devils and Dust tour, Real World in particular, in a stunning fashion. There's songs on here that are, some of his strongest songs. I mean, I Wish I Were Blind is a phenomenal song. That hugely underrated. With Every Wish is a phenomenal song. On the No Name Band tour, 57 Channels and Nothing On, reinvented as a completely different song when it first came out as a single. Human Touch blew me away. I tend to, though, in this ranking, if I'm going to be putting things in a tiered system, I move over more to Fozzie's C category, and I would slide it in nearer to the High Hopes category.
All right. So Will says A. Me and Mike say C. So I think that we can compromise and go with B. Is everyone fine with that?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Human Touch. B. Next on this list is The Ghost of Tom Joad. And Mike, I actually heard you talk about this, how you re-listened to it recently, I believe you said. And you've actually really come to like this record. So I'm
Well,
actually...
let me interject. I have not come to like this record.
Oh,
This record blew me away out of the gate.
okay.
And I think this was my Nebraska. And that Nebraska was released before I really started listening to Bruce. I got on board with Born in the USA and went back and retraced things. But when Ghost of Tom Joad came out, with just out of kind of nowhere, with not a sound I was expecting for years, this was my number one Springsteen album. But then because of its instrumentation and presentation, I wasn't always listening to it. So not to jump the gun and cut you off here, Fozzie, but Ghost of Tom Joad is absolutely in my superior range. And like several of the albums on this list, has spent the time in my number one slot. When he has his book Songs that came out a decade and a half ago, he once said, "This reflects the best of what I do." Springsteen wrote about this album.
Wow. Me personally, I enjoy this record. It's kind of around how I feel about Nebraska. I think it's one of his best records. And the song Ghost of Tom Joad Live is one of the most epic performances of any Springsteen song I've ever heard. I mean, especially with Tom Morello, it's incredible. I think this record is beautiful. I mean, it's definitely, once again, a darker Springsteen record, along the lines of Nebraska, kind of. But it's very intriguing, and each song is this once again like a in-depth story. I really enjoy this record, and I don't go back to it a lot just because it's kind of an intense listen, or you gotta kind of really think about what you're listening to, and sometimes that's not what you want when you listen to an album. You just want to be able to listen to and enjoy a pretty fun song, you know. So most times I probably wouldn't go to this record, but if I'm in the mood to just listen to some intense songs, I would definitely go with this. So for Ghost of Tom Joad, for me, I am feeling S to A tier. But Will, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I will get this in quickly before our time runs out, as we have about a minute left on this particular part of the podcast. I'll just say I hadn't listened to this album a ton, but when I did start to listen to it more recently, I realized that there were songs that I knew and that I was familiar with, like The Ghost of Tom Joad and Youngstown. Ghost of Tom Joad, as you said, Cam, great live performance of that song. I think there's a great live performance of Youngstown on the Live in New York City live album. So even though I hadn't listened to this album a ton until recently, when I did, I just said, boy, this is elite Springsteen. His songwriting is at an elite level. His storytelling is at an elite level. I would say what a great songwriter Springsteen is reflected very deeply in this album. So I would go top tier, S tier.
Okay. It looks like it's agreed upon. Ghost of Tom Joad goes into S tier for our fourth Bruce Springsteen S tier album. Alright, so next on our list here, we have The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. An album that I am not a huge fan of. I am kind of mixed on, but there are a few songs here or there, like Rosalita, which is one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs. But aside from that, there are a lot of other songs that I usually go to for this album. So for me, The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle is around B tier. But how do you guys feel about this?
Yeah, I'm looking at the set list right now. The E Street Shuffle, it's always fun when he does that live. I remember when Mike and I saw him in Portland earlier this year. He did the E Street Shuffle. That was a lot of fun, or a lot of fun, rather. I love 4th of July, Asbury Park, Sandy, Rosalita. I love when he does that live. Super fun. Ultimately, though, I feel like this is Bruce before the breakthrough, Bruce before his true brilliance, which I think started with Born to Run. So I'm going to actually 100% agree with Cam and go B tier. How about for you, Mike?
Yeah, complete agreement. It's all part of the evolution. It's great to listen to within the story of Springsteen and just such a different sound following Greetings. A shout out to Incident on 57th Street. If you haven't spent time with that particular track, Wild Billy Circus Story, another one. And I'll agree with B, but a B tier for Bruce Springsteen would be an S tier for many other artists.
Yeah. Definitely agree there. But next on our list we have Magic. This is one of my favorite Springsteen records. Radio Nowhere has been one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs for a while, along with Girls in Their Summer Clothes. Both of which are just two absolutely amazing songs, and two songs that each strike different moods, kind of. Um, so for this record, I feel like I would lean towards A tier. It just has a lot of value in it, and I mean, for an artist to be this deep into their career and still be able to make a song like "Girls in Their Summer Clothes" is just wild. Because that song is just it's a beautiful song, and this is a really good album. So for me, I don't think I'd put it in S tier. I'd probably put this in A tier, but I could definitely be convinced to go to S. Um, you guys' take on Magic?
Yeah, so I love this album. I have declared it my favorite Springsteen album at times
Wow.
because it's such a rockin' album, and I love to rock and roll. So just kind of the really rockin' vibe to it, I've just loved at times. You mentioned Radio Nowhere and Girls in Their Summer Clothes, Cam. I think those two songs, along with All Work for Your Love and Long Walk Home, are two of his best songs ever, or are four of his best songs ever. And there are so many other rockin' songs that I love on here too. So I think I love this album. I think it's one of his most underrated, and I would put it in the S tier, the top tier. So how about for you, Mike?
2008, second leg of the Magic Tour. I'd already seen him in Oakland, this time in Sacramento, California. Great seats, side stage. This is the phase of Springsteen's career when he started taking signs from the audience to play songs. He pulled out a song I'd never seen him play before, Sherry Darling. Comes playing the whole stage as he always does. Comes to the end where I was sitting with a friend of mine. During the song, Springsteen looks at me and gives me a fist bump, in the air. So I'm thinking, well, I'm just seeing things. After the show, the guy next to me says, pretty cool how Springsteen gave you that fist bump during the song. Underrated album. So many, you guys have captured a lot of its great qualities already. Some of the songs really found themselves live, like Long Walk Home with that Steve Van Zandt part that he sings at the end. I slot it into the A category, but I could be convinced of otherwise.
Will says S. Me and Mike both agreed that it could go to S tier. So I feel like
Yeah.
we could
Maybe
do.
A for yeah. I was thinking actually maybe A because if I think yes, but the both of you are leaning more toward A, I would say A would win in that particular
All right.
case.
Okay, we'll go with A. Perfect. And next up is The Rising, which is an album I listen to a lot. It has probably my favorite Bruce Springsteen song on it, Waiting on a Sunny Day, which is just a fantastic song. It has The Rising, which is another fantastic song. Mary's Place, which you played live when I saw him in August at Gillette Stadium. It was fantastic live performance for Mary's Place, which I was stunned he played, because he doesn't usually play Mary's Place. But it was an epic performance of that song. Um, the Rising, it has pretty much not one miss for me. And the Johnny Cash cover of Further On Up the Road is one of the most rocking Bruce Springsteen songs I've ever heard. And it just transforms this Johnny Cash song into a even more epic rocking song. And I really love this album. And the significance of it is incredible. I mean, I really enjoy this record, and it has probably my favorite Bruce Springsteen song of all time on it. I would go with S tier. What do you? How do you guys feel about this one?
Yeah, I love this. I love this album too. I'm right there with you on "Waiting on a Sunny Day." I've always loved that song. One of my favorites too. I think "Mary's Place," especially in the Live in Barcelona live show, is
Mm-hmm.
just stunning on 10th Avenue Freeze Out live in New York City level. That's how good I think that live performance of that song is. Obviously carries a whole heavier weight. Coming after 9/11. One of the most tragic events in recent memory. So I think he had a lot on his plate to deliver an album that would properly reflect how everybody and the country was feeling after the events of 9/11, and I think he knocked it out of the park. So I'm in total agreement with you, Cam. I would also go S tier, top tier. How about for you, Mike?
We haven't even mentioned the title track, The Rising, Into the Fire, or My City of Ruins. Three amazing songs. I saw this show one, two, three, 4 times in 4 different locations on the Rising tour. In Las Vegas, in San Jose, in Sacramento, and in San Francisco. And each time defining experiences. I actually think this is an underrated Superior album. I think this is elite Springsteen. I think his albums all now get measured against other albums, but this is a masterpiece of an album. And it's so diverse. It covers so much range. Its production by Brendan O'Brien, very high. I listened to this album. Oh, what about Lonesome Day? Come on, it's a live song. My goodness. Um, this was the tour though that also let me realize that sometimes behind the stage is the best seat because you're almost in the band and you get to see how the audience responds to the songs. Yeah, Superior.
Yeah, it's all agreed. S tier for The Rising, one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen albums of all time. Uh, Next up here is everyone's favorite Bruce Springsteen album, Born in the USA. Me personally, I think this album is heavily overrated. Not saying it's a bad album at all. I just think that people, if they think of Bruce Springsteen, they only think of Born in the USA, and it's actually I feel like it's not that good. I mean, it's definitely great, and it feels weird saying this because it's so iconic. I just don't love it like everyone else does. I think it's a great album, of course. Has a lot of really good songs, but I do think it's heavily overrated. Um, but once again, not saying it's a bad record, so I'd probably lean towards B tier on this one. Just he has better albums. He really does, and there are some weak tracks on here. Um, so yeah, B tier is what I'd go with for Born in the USA. How do you guys feel about this one?
Even though I like even though I like listening to the actual album, where I really fell in love with this album was he put out the live performance of this album with the E Street Band from the Wrecking Ball tour, and I just love watching that performance of the album start to finish. That's where I really fell in love with this record. Ultimate Ultimately, I think this is the true breakthrough for Bruce. I think Born to Run was a big one, really put him on the map, but this is the one that turned him into a superstar, and I think the quality of the album proves why. I love that live performance of it from the Wrecking Ball tour that he put out. This is an S, top tier for me. How about for you, Mike?
Such a complicated album because it's a victim of its own success. and sometimes it's hard to hear the songs because the album was so epic. This was my gateway album. There were 7 top 10 singles. I disagree with Kim. I don't think there's a weak track on this album at all. And also, when it came out, this is in the era when people really released singles, so they had B-sides. I get a fresh new B-side every time. Those songs were all amazing, and you can listen to them on tracks. That being said, in my own particular order, it tends to rank in the A category, but I don't think I hear the album cleanly all the time. It probably should be an S. I'm going to slot it in the A. It could end up being an S with me, years later. I agree with Will. You see it played beginning to end. You have a different relationship with how the songs evolve. It's really a companion piece with Nebraska. Many of the songs, 2/3 of them, were recorded during the Nebraska sessions.
So I think if we even this out, Cam and Mike, I say A, Cam says B, or sorry, I say S, Cam says B, Mike says A. If we even that all out, I think in A is probably where we should put it if we want to even it out.
I'd be fine with that. That sounds good to me.
Good to me.
Perfect. All right, next up we have Devils and Dust, which I don't really listen to a lot. It's another one of those albums that I don't go back to a lot. But there definitely are a lot of songs on here that I really enjoy, and I'm just pulling up the track list here because there are a few songs that I just like to highlight here. All the Way Home is a phenomenal song. I feel like Long Time Coming is a standout for me, and that's the one I tend to go back to and listen to a lot. I think it's an epic song. Yeah, that's probably my favorite song on Devils and Dust. An overall pretty good Springsteen album. I feel like I would definitely be fun with putting Devils and Dust in A tier.
So I love this album. I talked about this. Well, first of all, allow me to say, I love Bruce with the Street Band. That's ultimately where I love him, I think, the most. But boy, am I also a sucker for acoustic albums and acoustic performances. So I love whenever Bruce pulls albums like this out. Um, I talked about the Ghost of Tom Joad, and I said I felt like his songwriting and his storytelling was just on full display and in peak form. I feel the same way about that with this album. I feel like these acoustic albums where it's not all rocking all the time, it allows the songs to be quieter and you to be able to really focus on the lyrics more and hear his voice more and just really get into the story of the songs more. So not that his songwriting and storytelling isn't great on all albums, but I think the acoustic albums, the solo albums, really gives you a chance to focus on them more with the types of albums that they are. So I love this album. I would say S tier, top tier. How about for you, Mike?
Yeah, thank you. The year is 2005. Possibly 2006 because I saw it on the second leg. Bruce, this is his second solo tour. He went out solo for the Ghost of Tom Joad, but he went out solo and deconstructed what it really means to be a solo musician and how to perform in his way in a whole different landscape. I had to travel from California to Massachusetts, then to upstate New York to see him in Albany, New York. That concert's as good as any concert I've ever seen. And we talked about Dream Baby Dream off the High Hopes album, but that was the first time I ever saw her performed live, and it was one of the most mesmerizing things I've ever seen. This is an album that had tremendous legs to it. When I first listened to it, I liked it, but then I realized I could keep listening and listening and listening, and it had more and more to reveal. I think for me personally, it does slot in the A category, but it had S listening power for a long time. But I think I'm going to go A on this one. Let's also give a shout out to the song Maria's Bed. Phenomenal song as well.
All right, so looks like I say A, Mike say A. Will, are you fine with putting this in A tier?
I am, yeah.
Okay. Definitely a great Springsteen album. Um, there are definitely albums that I would rather listen to than Devils and Dust, but still a great listen. Next is Letter to You. I love this album. It is
Me
phenomenal.
too.
It is just, it's what we all needed. This released during the pandemic, and oh my goodness, this was a fantastic record to listen to. It's like a letter to his fans. Just, it has so many good songs. Ghost, Letter to You, See You in My Dreams. There are songs on here that check all the boxes, almost like Darkness on the Edge of Town did. Um, you have songs that are slower. You have acoustic songs. You have rocking songs like Rainmaker. It checks all the boxes. It checks all the Springsteen boxes. For me, I honestly feel like Letter to You. I really feel like it is an S tier Springsteen album. How do you guys feel about this one?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Cam. This is absolutely an S tier, top tier album for me. It's I feel like it's one of his most lyrically powerful albums. I've had some of my most moving Springsteen listens to this album. I feel like he's talking about, loss a lot in this album, and some of the bandmates he's lost over the years, like Danny Federici and Clarence Clemens. So I listened to songs like Ghost, where he's saying, I'm alive and I'm out here on my own. I feel like he's almost talking about like the awe of I'm still alive, I'm still here, even after all these people are gone. I feel like he's really talking about the awe of being alive. So that one's a real bone chilling song for me. And I'll See You in My Dreams is just so powerful to me. And I'm going to be selfish here for a second. So when I listened to this album, I said, Springsteen needs to close out the Letter to You tour solo acoustic doing this song. It would be such a powerful way to culminate the show and close it off. In Portland earlier this year, the show ends, solo acoustic performance of I'll See You in My Dreams. So I'm going to be selfish here for a second and give myself a pat on the back and some credit for that. I love this album. I think it's one of his most lyrically powerful and emotional albums, with the topic of loss that he's talking about a lot. Last Man Standing, another one of those songs where he's talking about being the last man standing from his first band, the Castile. So love this album. One of his most lyrically powerful and emotional to me. Top tier. How about for you, Mike?
Yeah, you guys have captured so many of the strengths of this album and its release. The title track, when the first single dropped, was just so moving to me, and was equally moving to me when Will and I saw him up in Portland, where we will be seeing Springsteen again on Easter Sunday in the year 2024 in San Francisco. So many things working on so many different levels on this album. Burning Train Live, an absolute revelation. That is the definitive performance. This one does slot in the A range, but it's the high A range for me. I'm not sure always about the positioning of some of the songs that he wrote younger that he brings in, and I'm not saying they're not great tracks, but their positioning on the album sometimes I questioned, or why Janie Needs a Shooter, what it added that wasn't already addressed in Songs for Orphans, or If I Was the Priest. I will love If I Was a Priest. This is a great album. I give it a high A. But if
All
you both
right.
have it in the S category, I'm fine going S.
I think we can agree on S. Is that all right? Yeah, we'll go with S on Letter to You. Love it. Oh, there we go. Next we have Lucky Town. Lucky Town is an album that was kind of a joint record with Human Touch. Solo Bruce album, no E Street Band here. I enjoyed this album. I listened to it more than I listened to Human Touch. Um, there were a lot of songs on here, specifically Better Days. Oh my goodness, do I love that song so much. If you, that's on my list of go-to Springsteen songs. Better Days is fantastic. It is definitely in my top 20 of Springsteen songs. Um, overall, I really enjoy this record. I don't listen to it a crazy amount, but there are definitely songs that I will listen to a lot here or there. And when I do listen to this record, I usually find myself liking it. Um, I'm feeling an A on this one, but I want to hear what you guys have to say about Lucky Town.
Yeah, I love this album. This is actually one of my favorite Springsteen albums. As I said, I love some of the really rockin' Springsteen albums, and I get that in songs like Better Days, Lucky Town, Local Hero, and Leap of Faith. By the way, I would say those are four of my all-time Springsteen songs, and to have um, four of the top five songs be four of my all-time favorite Springsteen songs. First of all, major credit to Bruce right there. And oh, by the way, the fourth song on the album, the other one in the top five, If I Should Fall Behind, in the live in New York City performance of that song is just breathtaking to me. So I love this album, one of my favorite Bruce albums. This is the S tier, the top tier for me. How about for you, Mike?
Everybody missed the boat on this album. This is the most undervalued, underappreciated, people having their head up their asses album. I just don't get it. This is elite Springsteen. This sat in my top tier for a long time. Let's go back to 1992, the Boston Garden, my first behind the stage experience. And both the albums had dropped, but I don't really see Human Touch and Lucky Town as companion pieces, although you kind of have to. Like, they're released the same day. The style of the cover designs is of the same, but Lucky Town really stands to me in that kind of solo Bruce project, almost similar to Tunnel of Love. But that show rocked, absolutely rocked, and it was so fresh in the material because there's so much of it was drawn from those two albums, and live is where they came alive. Great album, great performance. We're not even talking about tracks like My Beautiful Reward or Living Proof or The Big Muddy, other songs that are just exceptional. S, absolutely.
So yeah, I think I'd be fine with going S tier in this one. Will, how do you feel about that? You fine with S?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Lucky Town gets S tier. Next we have Seeger Sessions. This contains one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs, American Land. It is, especially live, a
Let me
fantastic.
just say that's the expanded edition. When Seeger Sessions first came out, American Land was not on it.
That's okay. Um, I
But he
guess
re-released it. He re-released it with American Land on it.
okay. Well, the version I listened to had American Land on it, and I really enjoyed that song in particular. And I love what he was going for with this album. And you would have never in a million years, when he released Born in the USA, thought, yeah, this is the album that this guy's gonna make. He's gonna make the Seeker Sessions record. Yeah, you never would have thought that. But now here we are. We have this record, and it is a favorite of mine. I really enjoy this record. I love how he was just experimenting with this type of music here. It's really interesting what he was trying to do, changing up his style. Um, and when people say all Springsteen songs because this I've heard this take, and I think it's ridiculous that all Springsteen songs sound the same. He's saying the same things in each of his songs. He doesn't have great songwriting. You clearly haven't listened to this album. This is different from everything else he's ever released. I mean, it is a really interesting record, and I would probably put it in S to A tier. How do you guys feel about this one?
Yeah, so part of me thinks you know, initially I was gonna put it in initially I was gonna say B tier, but then I told myself no, that's unfair because like some of your best listens to out like how you fell in love with Born in the USA, for instance, or The River were through watching live performances of the album. So like Born in the USA, like the live performance from the Wrecking Ball tour of that of that album, like that's where I fell in love with that album. For the River tour, when he did the River Tour 2.0 back in 2016, that Mike I know you saw at the Oracle Arena in Oakland, former home of the Golden State Warriors. Like how I how I fell in love with the River album was by going on YouTube and watching concerts from that tour. So initially I was gonna go B because I'm just not wild about the studio album. But however, I'm like, if I'm gonna put other albums in the S tier or the A tier and say that I fell in love with them watching them live, well then it's unfair to me to put this one in a B and say that I don't like the studio album when I love the album live and I fell in love with this album live just like I did with other albums. So initially I was going to put it in the B category or the B tier, but then I told myself, no, that's unfair. That's not in line with what you talked about earlier. I fell in love with this album live with the Live in Dublin release, but I fell in love with other albums live too. So because of that, I want to be in line with what I said earlier. And actually, I love Live in Dublin so much. That's one of my all-time favorite Springsteen live albums and just Springsteen releases, period. So believe it or not, I love Live in Dublin so much. I'm going S. How about for you, Mike?
Let me think. 2006, the Concord Pavilion. When this album came out, it shocked people. No one expected this. They thought he was going to come back with an E Street album because the album before was Devils and Dust. That night, his performance live was jaw-dropping, and the version of this album that you love, Cam, with American Land on it, also has Bring 'Em Home, a live performance. That performance is from the show I saw at the Concord Pavilion. That being said, this is my least listened to studio release from Bruce Springsteen. I slot it in the C category. But on the heels of what Will is saying, Live in Dublin, one of my most listened to Springsteen albums. That's where the show and the songs, I think, found themselves. If we were rating live albums, I'd have it in the superior. But this album, although I'm intrigued by the project, I don't think it found itself until it went on the road. And so just in terms of how I rate it against other Springsteen albums, because the original release that came out didn't even have American Land on it, it slots in at the C category for me.
Okay. So Will, you said S. I said A to S. Mike says C. So B or A is the question here. What would you guys be fine with?
I'm conflicted between those two. What do you think, Mike? What do you think's most reflective of the three of us?
What did you rank it at again, Fozzie?
S or A, I could put it in.
And you had it S, then it should be A, Will.
Okay, yeah, actually, you're right. I was beginning to
Alright.
think that myself. So then
I
A,
think.
yeah,
Alright.
sounds
A
great to me.
works. Alright, next we have Wrecking Ball. This is an album that has went up and down and up and down the ranks for me. It's was for a while one of my favorite Springsteen records, and then I got sick of it, and then it went down in the rankings. But now it's kind of in the middle for me. I enjoy it, but it is still not a favorite of mine. Like I said, and probably in the next few months I'll listen to it again, and I'll be like, it's a good record, because my opinion is just constantly changing on this record. A highlight of mine is Shackled and Drawn, a fantastic song. Land of Hope and Dreams is fantastic. Wrecking Ball's a great song. And there are just some song. I don't know why sometimes I just find myself getting annoyed by this record. Sometimes the song Rocky Ground is one of my favorite Springsteen songs. I'm like, alright, I'm really feeling the song. And sometimes this song just makes me mad for some reason because it annoys me. I don't know why. I don't know if anyone else feels this strongly about this record. But it depends what mood I'm in. It depends how I'm feeling, you know. So I'd probably put this record into a B to an A tier, because sometimes I'm feeling A, sometimes I'm feeling B. So yeah, I could go with either of those. How do you guys feel about this one?
I actually love this album. I love how he was responding to what was going on in the country at that time with the economy, like with the rising. I feel like he had a lot of pressure on his plate to come out with an album that properly reflected what was going on in the country at that time and how people were feeling about it. I think he did an exceptional job. I think he's got some of his best songs on here, like Wrecking Ball and Land of Hope and Dreams and American Land. So I love this album. This is an S top tier for me. How about for you, Mike?
Yeah, I love this album as well. I think it has some of his best work if you go song for song, because we're not even talking about songs like, Easy Money or Death to My Hometown, which is amazing live. Wrecking Ball is a definitive song for me in the Springsteen catalog. Um, you know that he was actually able to go to a song that people knew for years, Land of Hope and Dreams, and find a way to bring it to a studio recording that felt alive and fresh. There's so much happening on this album that I love. It does hover the line between S and A for me, but I could easily slot it into the S category.
All right.
Sounds like maybe because Mike, if you're going back and forth between S and A, I'm at S and Cam, you're at B. I'm thinking maybe an A for this one.
Yeah, that works for me.
I can live with that, but it's a high A. For me, it's
Yeah.
the number one A in that category. For me,
All
I
right.
know Will maybe Magic would be yours.
We might have to start to
Yeah.
speed it up here just due to time constraints, which is fine, because we don't have a whole lot of albums left, and I think we'll be able to breeze through these relatively
Yeah,
quickly.
let's do it.
So here we have the river, and the river is the answer when people ask me. This has happened several times actually. If you could only listen to one Springsteen song for the album for the rest of your life, what would you listen to? I always go with the answer of the river. There are so many songs on here, and not one of them misses. I feel like it has songs for different moods. If you're happy, you got songs to listen to. If you're kind of down, you got songs to listen to too, as well. And there are a lot of songs on here. Um, it just kind of once again checks off all the boxes, and the albums that check off all the boxes usually wind up being some of my favorite Bruce Springsteen records. So for me, The River goes S tier. What are you guys' thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Cam. I'll make this short and sweet. I fell in love with this album watching concerts that people posted online from the River Tour 2.0 back in 2016. That Mike, I know you went to, as I said earlier, at the Oracle Arena in Oakland, former home of my team, the Golden State Warriors. I love this album. I think it's one of his most iconic from when he was young and in his peak in the 80s. I think if you're talking, iconic young Springsteen albums. It's this Darkest on the Edge of Town, Born to Run, Born in the USA. Love this album. S top tier for me as well. How about for you, Mike?
Got a wife and kids in Baltimore, Jack. I went out for a ride and I never went back. Like a river that don't know where it's flowing, I took a wrong turn and I just kept going. And that's a pop song, ladies and gentlemen. Double album, masterpiece. I agree with Cam. Sometimes I say this would be the one album I would listen to. It was phenomenal on the River 2.0 tour, a jaw dropper, a absolute jaw dropper of a performance. Yes.
All right, it's settled then. River S tier.
I'm
This-
sorry, River. River's getting cheated. We should be talking about River for 25 minutes.
I agree. I could talk about this one for a while, but this is the record, Working on a Dream, which is up right now. I've been wanting to talk about this one all night. This is the album everyone hates on. Why? There are so many good songs on this album. Outlaw Pete is epic. Working on a Dream, the song, he played it in the Super Bowl. It is a phenomenal song. Lucky Day, it's one of the happiest Springsteen songs you'll hear. Surprise, surprise, epic. I mean, it's a fun song. This is a great Springsteen album. I mean, Good Eye is the most. No one was expecting Bruce Springsteen to use a weird voice changer on that song, and it works. It works. You never thought that would happen. This gets hated on way too much, in my opinion, and I could talk about this for like an hour, but this album gets an S tier for me.
Yeah, I love this album too. It was one of my favorites for a long time. I would still say it's not the typical songs you hear from a Bruce Springsteen in the Street Band album, but I love that he's experimenting, trying different things. As I look at some of the albums now in the S tier at this point in my life, I'm like, I wouldn't quite put the album over the ones we have in the S tier at this particular point in my life, but still, I love this album. I would go A tier. How about for you, Mike?
I agree with so many points that have been made. I believe it's a misunderstood album, similar to Lucky Town. And I saw this album opening night of the tour, the opening show, San Jose, California. He played The Good Eye that night. I think it's the only time he's ever played it live in his entire career. The closeout of this album, Kingdom of Days, Surprise, Surprise, in the last Carnival, stunning. I slot it into the A category.
All right, it looks like we're going with A on Working on a Dream,
But I
and
could spend a long time dissecting that album too.
as could I.
We could do a whole episode on that.
All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Everything Podcast. We will be back with a part 2, which will be super exciting. I cannot wait for that. Will, Mike, thank you guys so much for joining me. And the part 2 will be great. We have a bunch more tier lists to go through. We mentioned some of them at the beginning of the podcast. So yeah, I think you guys are really going to enjoy all of that. But yeah, in part 2, we'll finish our Springsteen tier list, and we will be able to finish everything up. So yeah, Mike, thanks for joining us, and he will be back for part 2, and we might have to do a part 3, because this took us a while. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Everything Podcast. Mike and Will, thanks for joining me. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you in part 2 of the Tier List New Year special. Alright, see you guys.